It began with a ripple, a strange distortion in the fabric of space, a small flicker on the edge of the solar system, unnoticed at first by the people of Earth. But then the stars seemed to dim as though a shadow had passed between them. An unnatural stillness descended upon the world, the usual hum of radio waves, and transmissions suddenly silenced. It was as if the universe had held its breath. No one understood why at first. Humanity went on with its daily routines, unaware of the impending presence creeping closer and closer with each passing hour. It wasn't until the first planetary defense systems detected the anomaly that the world's attention turned to the sky. Massive ships, the likes of which had never been seen before, were approaching Earth, their hulls gleaming black and organic, as though they were grown rather than built. The ships were enormous, larger than anything humanity had ever encountered. Their scale was impossible to fathom, and yet they glided silently through space like shadows waiting for something. No one knew what. In the days that followed, the United Nations and other global bodies attempted to establish contact with the invaders. Their most advanced communication systems failed to make any impact. The ships did not respond to any signals, nor did they send any of their own. The world's governments sent their most powerful fleets to intercept, but the vessels were met with nothing but the cold void of space and an unnerving silence. The fear began to spread. Rumors circulated that the invaders had already begun their assault, but there was no evidence, nothing to explain the lack of action. It was as if the world was being watched by eyes that never blinked. The atmosphere began to shift. Strange readings were detected across the planet. Magnetic fields fluctuated in erratic patterns. Scientists were baffled by the data. Some hypothesized that the invaders were sending a form of silent signal, altering Earth's electromagnetic spectrum, causing interference with the planet's natural systems. The Earth itself was changing without explanation. Crops withered, oceans churned, and weather patterns became increasingly violent. Storms ravaged coastlines, wildfires tore through forests in an unrelenting fury. Entire cities were struck by sudden and inexplicable power failures. Communications failed, and people were left to wonder if this was a prelude to something worse. As panic spread across the globe, militaries mobilized with unprecedented speed. Global tensions that had been simmering for decades were forgotten in the face of a threat no one could comprehend. But the silent ones did not act. They watched and waited. Their fleet loomed large above the Earth, but no shots were fired, no armies landed. The silence deepened, and with it the fear. Humanity could not ignore the growing sense that something was coming, something ancient and powerful that would bring the end of everything without a single word being spoken. No one knew why they had come, no one knew what they wanted, but one thing was clear: the Silent Ones had arrived, and Earth was no longer alone in the universe. The days turned into weeks, and still no word came from the Silent Ones. Their ships remained in orbit above Earth, a constant looming presence, with no sign of movement, no sign of aggression, but no sign of peace. Either the world held its breath as military forces gathered in every major city preparing for an attack that never came. The silence was maddening. It gnawed at the edges of human resolve, and the world's leaders found themselves growing desperate in the face of such uncertainty. Earth's communication systems were completely disrupted, not just on a local scale, but globally. Every attempt to reach out to the invaders failed. No signals were returned. Nothing could break the quiet barrier that surrounded the alien fleet. It was as if the Silent Ones had cut themselves off from the rest of the universe, deliberately severing any connection to the world that might have been left. But even worse was the unnerving stillness in the air. There was no sound of satellites, no hum from radio waves, not even the distant chatter of ships moving through space. Nothing at all. The world's technology began to feel like a broken record stuck in an endless loop, unable to escape its own echo. In the absence of communication, the paranoia grew to terrifying heights. Entire populations became convinced that the silence was a harbinger of death. The very idea of not knowing what was happening began to eat away at the collective sanity of humanity. Without answers to their questions, people started to panic. Entire nations began to hoard resources, building walls to protect themselves from an enemy they could not see but feared nonetheless. With the air thick with fear, governments imposed curfews and quarantines, all to no avail. No one knew where the enemy was or when they would strike. Then came the first signs of change from above. Strange phenomena began to occur. The weather patterns worsened. Storms formed without warning. Hurricanes swept across continents and flash floods tore through cities. But these were no natural disasters. These were something else entirely unnatural in their intensity. It was as though the very planet itself was fighting against its own existence. Oceans receded and then surged without cause. Droughts turned to floods, turning vast stretches of land into barren deserts, and the air grew heavy with a strange fog, as if something was altering the very composition of Earth's atmosphere. Humanity could no longer ignore it. Something was happening on a level that surpassed understanding, and still the Silent Ones did nothing. They watched and waited, and the world trembled as if the very air had turned to poison. No one could pinpoint the source of the changes that were occurring. Everything seemed connected, the planet's systems, all functioning against each other. Nothing was stable anymore, but no one knew what to do. Not even the brightest minds of Earth's scientific community could offer answers. Then, in the midst of this turmoil, the first theories began to emerge. Some suggested that the Silent Ones were not attacking at all, but altering Earth's environment for a reason unknown, as though they were preparing the planet for something. But for what purpose, no one could answer. The more humanity tried to make sense of the silence, the more it twisted into a deeper mystery. The world waited for a sign, for any sort of indication of what the Silent Ones wanted, but as the days passed, the silence remained unbroken, and the fear continued to build like a pressure building under the surface, waiting to erupt. Weeks passed, and the silence of the Silent Ones weighed heavier with each day. Humanity could no longer remain passive. The world's most brilliant minds were now frantically searching for any clue, any sign of what was happening. The planet's systems were unraveling, and the invaders remained unmoving, watching from above without any hint of intention or motive. No one knew what they wanted, or if they even intended to speak to humanity again. But then a breakthrough came. Tamara Chen, a young astrophysicist working in a secluded research lab, had been combing through Earth's electromagnetic spectrum for months, looking for any anomaly that could offer an explanation for the strange disturbances in the planet's atmosphere. She had been analyzing the data from a satellite array set up to monitor deep space signals when she discovered something peculiar buried deep within the static, a faint repeating pattern embedded in the cosmic noise. It was subtle, almost undetectable at first glance, but once she honed in on it, the pattern became undeniable. The signal was old, ancient, almost as if it had been waiting to be discovered. It wasn't a conventional transmission, not like anything humanity had encountered before. It wasn't designed to be heard, but to be felt, as if it were woven into the very fabric of the universe itself. Chen was both thrilled and terrified at what she had uncovered. She called her team together, and together they worked tirelessly to decode the fragmented transmission. It was slow going, but they began to piece together fragments of words, strange symbols, and cryptic phrases. As they worked, they realized that the signal was not meant for any individual, but for the entire planet. It was a message meant for humanity itself. As the team decoded the message, the truth began to unfold. The signal was a warning, an ancient relic of a time long past. It told of a race of beings known only as the defenders of Earth, beings who had once stood guard over the planet against cosmic threats. But the signal also revealed something darker, a terrifying truth about the Silent Ones. Their true purpose was not conquest, but annihilation. They had come to eradicate humanity and any civilization that dared to resist the cosmic order. They were the agents of silence, an ancient force that had been hunting down species across the stars for millennia. The Silent Ones were not invaders in the traditional sense. They were not seeking to conquer or rule. They were there to erase all traces of life, leaving behind only silence in their wake. They viewed all forms of communication and existence as an affront to the cosmic balance, and it was their sole purpose to restore that balance by eradicating civilizations like humanity that dared to resist the silence. Chen and her team were shaken by what they had uncovered. The implications were staggering. They had learned not only that the Silent Ones were not interested in dialogue, but that their very presence on Earth was part of a larger cosmic purge, a systematic extermination of all life that posed a threat to the silence. It was a terrifying revelation. The world's most powerful governments had been clueless to the nature of their enemy, and now it seemed they were fighting not for survival, but for their very existence. But the signal had more to reveal. Within it, buried deep in its encrypted layers, was another startling discovery. The defenders of Earth were not just a long-lost race of warriors. They were a part of humanity's own ancient history, and their technology lay hidden beneath the surface of Earth itself. Humanity's last hope rested in the secrets buried beneath their feet. The revelation was both a curse and a lifeline. Humanity was faced with an unimaginable threat, but within the cryptic message lay the key to survival. Buried beneath Earth's surface was a dormant power, one that could turn the tide against the Silent Ones. Chen and her team shared their findings with the world's governments in a desperate bid to rally humanity's forces together. Though the discovery sparked a sense of urgency, the fractures of global politics could not be easily healed. The world was not unified in their response. Some believed the threat was too great to confront. Others saw the defenders' technology as a potential weapon too dangerous to wield, but the alternative was worse: an annihilation without a fight. With no time to waste and no clear path forward, the world's remaining leaders agreed to take the gamble. They would attempt to awaken the ancient power hidden beneath their feet, while simultaneously launching a counteroffensive against the Silent Ones. Humanity's resistance was born from chaos, yet it was their only option. In the middle of this frenzy, Lieutenant Alex Garris, an untested young pilot, became an unexpected hero. He had been one of the many disillusioned by the silence, who saw the inaction of Earth's leaders as the first step to their doom. But when word of the newly discovered technology reached him, he felt something stir deep within his chest, a spark of hope. He volunteered for the first strike back. Humanity's most advanced warship, the Valiant, had just been launched to act as the spearhead of the resistance, but it was underprepared, underfunded, and ill-equipped to face the overwhelming might of the Silent Ones. Despite these disadvantages, Garris and his crew were determined to give everything they had in a desperate attempt to strike a blow against the invaders. They used the old guerrilla tactics of hit-and-run attacks, striking quickly from the shadows, hoping to catch the enemy off guard. Their first target was one of the Silent One's smaller vessels, a transport ship that had been quietly hovering near the outskirts of Earth's atmosphere. Garris and his squadron launched a surprise assault against the vessel using stealth technology. To avoid detection, they maneuvered through the Silent One's defenses with skill and precision. The Silent Ones had yet to realize the threat was coming their way. As they approached, Garris made the call they would strike with everything they had. The ship's weapon systems were fired in rapid succession, tearing into the alien ship's hull and causing a massive explosion that sent debris spiraling into the void. The battle was over before the Silent Ones knew what hit them. The victory was bittersweet, though, as it was only a small skirmish in the grand scheme of things. But the message was clear: humanity was capable of more than just silence. They were willing to fight back with every ounce of strength they had left. The victory sparked a wave of hope across the planet, even as the Silent Ones did nothing to retaliate. Still, the world held its breath, waiting for the enemy to strike back, waiting for the storm to finally break. But nothing came. The Silent Ones remained silent. Their ships still hovered above Earth with a chilling stillness. Their purpose remained as mysterious as ever. But the human resistance had learned something important. It wasn't just a fight for survival now. It was a battle for their future. Their spirit would not be broken, and they would not let the silence take their world. The small victory over the Silent Ones was a spark in the darkness, but it was only that a spark. The Silent Ones remained unmoved. Their massive ships still circled Earth, as though waiting for something. Humanity's forces, though emboldened by the attack, knew they were still outmatched. The Silent Ones' fleet was overwhelming, their weapons far superior, and yet the victories began to pile up in the form of shattered hulls and disabled ships. But even with these small victories, humanity could sense the inevitable was coming. The tide of war would not turn unless they could uncover the full depth of the power they had discovered beneath the Earth's surface. Chen and her team had spent countless hours working with the ancient data from the signal. Their understanding of the defenders had deepened. The race was not simply a myth or an ancient civilization. Their technology had been embedded deep within Earth. for eons waiting for a time like this. To awaken the defenders themselves were a race of beings who had transcended flesh and blood. They had melded with machines and built great weapons not of metal, but of energy. They had left behind their knowledge, their legacy in hidden temples scattered across the planet. With each passing day, Chen and her team pieced together the coordinates to these hidden sites. The world's leaders scrambled to mobilize their forces towards these locations. It was a race against time. If they could unlock the full potential of the Defenders' technology, they might stand a chance at confronting the Silent Ones and their devastating power. But if they failed, humanity would be lost. The first site uncovered was in the deep jungles of South America. The ruins were covered by centuries of foliage and earth, but beneath the layers of time, a power slumbered hidden away from the world, in the form of ancient machines and a vast library of knowledge. Humanity's scientists began to explore the site, extracting data from the strange glowing devices. They discovered it was alien yet familiar, a blend of technology and biology that seemed almost alive, as though the machines had grown in place rather than been built. The power they unlocked began to transform Earth's weapon systems. The energy shields on their warships began to strengthen. The weapons grew more precise and deadly, but this was only the beginning. Meanwhile, Garrus and his crew had been called back to Earth after their initial strike. They were briefed on the discovery and the potential for new technology to turn the tide of war. Garrus had become a symbol of humanity's resilience, but he was no longer just a pilot. Now he was part of something greater, part of the force that would decide Earth's fate. The ancient machines that powered the Defenders' weapons began to hum with life. As more sites were discovered, the hidden temples sprang to life, releasing their power to the people of Earth. Each site uncovered revealed more about the Defenders who had once protected Earth from invaders far worse than the Silent Ones. They had left behind a legacy not of mere survival, but of a promise to return when the world needed them most. And now they had returned, not in the form of a race, but through the machines and weapons they had left behind. Humanity was beginning to awaken to its true potential, but the Silent Ones had begun to notice the shift in power. Their silence was no longer just a tactic, it was an overwhelming force, a constant presence over Earth. But the momentum had shifted. Humanity had discovered something the Silent Ones had not anticipated, a will to fight that was stronger than fear. The balance had shifted, but it was fragile. Humanity's new weapons were nothing compared to the full might of the Silent Ones. Their ships moved in perfect formation around Earth like an unblinking eye, never wavering from its target. But the newly awakened technology had begun to take hold. Humanity's warships now gleamed with energy shields and deadly precision. Their weapons crackled with a power they had never known before. For the first time since the Silent Ones arrived, the invaders seemed to flinch, but only for a moment, and then the storm broke. The Silent Ones retaliated with ruthless efficiency. Their fleet moved like a singular organism, coordinated and relentless, as they unleashed their full fury upon Earth's defenses. Their massive ships opened fire, sending waves of energy blasts that tore through the planet's surface. Entire cities were obliterated in an instant. The Silent Ones had no mercy, no hesitation. They came to destroy, and they would not stop until Earth was no more. Humanity fought back with everything they had. The newly forged weapons of the Defenders collided with the Silent Ones' energy blasts in the sky, and on the ground the resistance was fierce. But it was clear that Earth's forces were outmatched. The Silent Ones' sheer numbers seemed impossible to overcome, but humanity's will remained unbroken. On the front lines, Garrus and his squadron were leading the charge. Their warship, Valiant, was at the heart of the battle. The crew had become a family, forged in the heat of the fight. But even they could feel the weight of the enemy pressing in around them. The Silent Ones were relentless in their assault, their ships closing in on Earth's remaining forces like a tightening noose. With each passing minute, the situation grew dire. Garrus barked orders into his comm system as his fighters zipped through the chaotic sky, dodging blasts from the Silent One's energy weapons. His heart pounded in his chest as his hands gripped the controls. He had never fought like this before. It was as though the very air itself was charged with the energy of a dying star. But despite the odds, despite the overwhelming power of their enemy, humanity refused to surrender. They would not let Earth fall into silence. Turchen and her team worked frantically from their underground command center. As the battle raged above their heads, they had made a breakthrough in the ancient technology that could change the course of the war. They had found a way to amplify the power of the defenders' weapons, making them more efficient, more destructive, and they were ready to deploy it. But the process was delicate. One mistake, and the energy released could destroy everything around them. It was a gamble, but it was the only chance humanity had left. As the battle raged, the situation grew worse. With each passing moment, Earth's military forces were being overwhelmed by the sheer number of Silent One ships. The sky above Earth became a battlefield of twisting energy and shattered metal. But just as it seemed that the Silent Ones would finally claim victory, humanity's final weapon was unleashed. The amplified energy of the Defender's technology crackled through the atmosphere like a storm, and in a flash of blinding light, the Silent One ships began to falter. Their shields flickered and then fell. The tide had turned, but the fight was far from over. The Silent Ones were not defeated yet. They had only just begun to reveal the true depth of their power. But now humanity knew something the Silent Ones did not. They knew that no matter the odds, no matter how fierce the storm, they would not go quietly into the night. News of Earth's unexpected resistance began to spread across the galaxy, and the response was mixed. Some alien races watched with a mix of awe and fear. Others retreated into isolation, preparing for the worst. The Silent Ones were known throughout the stars as an unstoppable force, an ancient empire built on silence and destruction. But now the invaders had encountered something they had not anticipated: a species unwilling to surrender, a planet that would not fall into the silence of extinction, and it terrified the galaxy's other civilizations. In the dark corners of space, deep within hidden star systems, ancient races whispered of the Silent One's true nature. They were not just conquerors, they were eradicators, born of a forgotten cosmic philosophy, one that viewed all life as an affront to the natural order. The Silent Ones had been tasked with purging the universe of civilizations that had reached too far, grown too strong, and now Earth was one of their targets. It was not just a matter of conquest, but of universal balance, and their appearance in Earth's orbit was a signal that the planet had become a threat to that balance. While the Silent One ships continued their relentless assault on Earth's defenses, new threats began to emerge. The galaxy's most powerful empires began to prepare for the possibility that the Silent Ones would turn their attention toward them. As well, entire fleets were constructed in secret, with the hope of holding back the tide. If the Silent Ones could be stopped at Earth's doorstep, then perhaps the galaxy could be saved. But none of the empires knew how to fight a force that operated outside of all known logic. On Earth, Garrus and his squadron had been at the forefront of the battle. Since the first strike, they had led the charge against the Silent One's fleet. But now they were no longer fighting just for Earth's survival. They were fighting for the very idea of life in the universe. Humanity's unwillingness to submit had caught the attention of something greater than the Silent Ones, something that reached across the stars and left a mark on every civilization they encountered. It was a fight for the soul of the galaxy itself. Turchen and her team worked tirelessly to decipher the ancient texts and technologies left behind by the defenders. They now understood that the Silent One's true power was not just in their ships, but in their philosophy, their unyielding belief that silence was the ultimate state of existence, that all life was temporary and unnecessary. This belief had driven them to erase species and civilizations across the galaxy for eons, but humanity's refusal to submit had placed them on a collision course with a power far greater than anyone had ever imagined. The Silent Ones had underestimated humanity's will to live, and their need to communicate. The galaxy had never seen a species like Earth's. Humans were not content to exist in silence. They created art, they formed relationships, they spoke across the stars, they built civilizations from nothing, and refused to bow to any force that sought to take their voice away. And it was this very drive that was beginning to destabilize the Silent One's empire. Their purpose was being questioned, and that in itself was a crack in their seemingly impenetrable armor. As the Silent One's fleet began to regroup, their strategy shifted. They knew now that the battle for Earth was not just a test of strength, but a test of will. and they feared what would happen if humanity succeeded in breaking their silence once and for all, because if Earth could resist their power, the galaxy would follow, and that was something they could not allow. The galaxy held its breath as Earth's fate hung in the balance. The Silent Ones had begun to shift their tactics, no longer merely attacking. They were waiting, calculating, studying the resistance they had faced on Earth. They understood now that humanity was different. It was not just another species to be erased. It was a species that could not be silenced. No matter the force brought against it, they had underestimated humanity's drive to fight back. And now they were forced to reconsider their strategy. But that did not mean they would relent. Across Earth, the battle reached its boiling point. The skies were filled with flashes of energy. As humanity's warships clashed with the Silent Ones' overwhelming fleet, their shields crackled against each other in violent bursts. The once mighty cities of Earth had been reduced to rubble, yet the fighting raged on. Humanity refused to yield. No matter how many lives were lost, no matter how much destruction was wrought, the resistance held firm. Garrus and his crew had been on the front lines since the beginning. Their ship, Valiant, had become the symbol of humanity's resolve. But now even they could feel the weariness of the war. Each strike they made against the Silent Ones came at a cost. The crew had seen too many fall, too many ships reduced to nothing but stardust and scrap metal, yet they kept fighting, because they knew that to stop now would be to let the Silent Ones win. And that was a fate worse than death. Turchen and her team had uncovered the last of the Defender's hidden technology, deep beneath Earth's surface, a final piece of the puzzle that had been left behind. But even they were unsure of how to use it. The ancient weapon was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. It was not just a machine, it was a force of nature, something that could shift the very fabric of reality itself. But to activate it would take everything they had. They could not afford mistakes. There was no second chance. The Silent Ones had begun to act in ways humanity could not predict. Their ships moved with surgical precision. Their strikes were timed to cause maximum devastation. They began to target the key power centers on Earth, not just military bases, but communication hubs, energy plants, everything that kept the world moving. As the planet's defenses crumbled, the pressure grew unbearable. Humanity's resistance began to fracture under the weight of the war. The will to fight began to wane in some corners of the world as people struggled to hold on to hope. But even in those moments of doubt, a single truth remained: humanity would never surrender. Then came the moment that would change everything. The last of the Defender's technology was activated. The ground shook as energy surged through Earth's core. The skies above crackled with a brilliant light, a storm of energy so intense that it reverberated across the galaxy. Every civilization that had been watching the war stopped in its tracks. The Silent Ones halted their assault in shock as the power of the ancient weapon surged upward like a tidal wave of energy that engulfed the atmosphere. The Silent Ones' fleet began to disintegrate as the energy from Earth's core surged outward. Their ships flickered and vanished as if they were never there. The ground beneath Earth's surface rumbled, and then everything fell silent. The galaxy had witnessed a miracle. Earth had not been destroyed but transformed. The Silent Ones had been defeated not through force, but through the will of humanity to survive and to speak. But as the silence finally descended upon Earth, it was not the same silence the Silent Ones had sought to impose. This silence was different. It was the silence of a new beginning, the silence of a species that had endured and emerged stronger than ever before. And as the world began to rebuild, it knew that its fight was far from over. But now it stood not in the shadow of the Silent Ones, but in the light of its own unbreakable spirit.